Revenge with Anjo.
Raina Cole never imagined that 4 short words could collapse a lifetime of loyalty, but the message from her sister arrived on a quiet Thursday afternoon like a blade slipping through fabric. "Don't come to my wedding." She stared at her phone, still holding the receipt from the latest payment she had made. One more installment in the nearly $100,000 she had spent building the ceremony her sister claimed she had always dreamed of. The venue, the imported flowers, the designer gown fittings, the catering, all of it arranged, managed, and funded by her. Yet it wasn't the text that truly hollowed her chest. It was everything that followed: her mother's cold explanation, the planner's sudden silence, and the discovery she unearthed in the contracts she had signed without hesitation. What she found changed the direction of everything. And when she chose to use it, none of them, not one, saw it coming. Raina had spent most of her life being the dependable one, the daughter who handled things without complaint, the sister who understood without being told. Growing up in Spokane, she learned early that her calmness wasn't a personality trait, but a requirement. Her mother, Valerie, often said, "Raina is steady. She doesn't need checking on," while Mira, her younger sister, was treated like delicate glass. Mira was sensitive, easily overwhelmed, fragile, words repeated so often they became truth. While Mira was comforted and shielded from discomfort, Raina walked herself to school, filled out her own forms, and made her own meals because Valerie was always driving Mira to an art class she'd quit a week later. Their father, James, wasn't unkind, but he floated above conflict like a silent cloud. If Valerie chose a side, he simply nodded. By the time Raina reached adulthood, the pattern was carved into bedrock. Mira expected help the way she expected air, naturally, automatically. And Raina lived in a world where needing anything felt like a burden. So when Mira got engaged to Darren Wells, smooth-talking and polished, Raina wasn't surprised when Valerie called that night with no greeting. "Raina, Mira needs your help. This wedding is her dream, and you're so good at managing things." That phone call marked the beginning of a 6-month marathon Raina never agreed to, but stepped into anyway. There were invoices, deposits, venue proposals, floral consultations, catering tastings, decor mock-ups, and endless emails from the planner. Raina managed everything, often late at night under the warm glow of her Seattle apartment kitchen lights. She paid thousands for the gown fittings, secured the ballroom with the chandelier Mira wanted since childhood, and covered the bill for the imported lilies Mira claimed she'd been dreaming of since she was 10. Mira would twirl around the empty ballroom during walkthroughs, whispering, "This is it, Rainy, my perfect day." And every time Mira smiled, Raina convinced herself it was worth it. Maybe this would finally be the moment she felt seen. Maybe Mira would look at her with gratitude instead of expectation. But small things began to shift in ways that prickled the back of her neck. The planner forgot to CC her on a meeting. The florist asked Mira for approval, even though Raina was paying the invoices. The band coordinator sent details directly to Mira. At first, Raina brushed it off. People were busy. Mistakes happened. But the pattern grew harder to ignore. Then came the video call with Darren's mother, Evelyn Wells, a woman with a polite smile and sharp, assessing eyes. Evelyn spoke slowly, choosing each word as if it were a brushstroke on fine glass. "We want a peaceful ceremony, simple and elegant," she said, her gaze lingering on Raina for a moment too long. The word peaceful hung in the air like a pointed reminder. Raina didn't understand the meaning then, but later it would make painful sense. A week after the call, the shared wedding folder stopped updating. When Raina emailed the planner, she received a clipped response. "We'll keep Mira closely looped in." Mira, who hadn't coordinated a single detail. Mira, who never read contracts, never tracked deadlines. Meanwhile, Myra's messages to Raina grew shorter. Slower responses. No more excited voice memos about color palettes or centerpieces. One afternoon, when Raina called to check on the seating chart, Mira sighed, "I'll think about it," and hung up. The girl who once cried over a chipped nail suddenly had no energy for the sister funding her entire wedding. But the real fracture came a week before the ceremony when Mira sent the message that shifted everything. "Don't come to my wedding." Raina stared at the text in disbelief. At first, she thought it was a joke. Some sarcastic comment Mira would follow with a laughing emoji. But nothing came. She called her sister. No answer. She tried again. Straight to voicemail. Finally, she typed, "What's going on?" 3 disappeared, appeared again. Then nothing. 20 minutes later, Valerie called. Her voice was soft but firm, a tone she reserved for moments she needed something from Raina. "Sweetheart, don't take it personally," she began. "Evelyn thinks your presence might create tension. And you know how direct you can be." Raina swallowed hard. "I paid for everything, Mom." Valerie sighed. "You're strong. You'll understand." That sentence, the one Valerie used like a bandage to cover every wound, felt like a slap. She hung up before Valerie finished speaking. For the rest of the night, Raina sat in her dimly lit kitchen, surrounded by contracts and receipts spread across her laptop. She expected to feel devastated or furious. Instead, a strange clarity settled over her. She began reviewing every document with new eyes, tracing through dates, email threads, agreements. And that's when she found the detail she'd missed, a detail that changed everything. Every single contract was under her name. She didn't sleep that night. Rain drummed against her Seattle window as she sat with her laptop open, scanning every contract with a steady, frightening calm. The venue agreement listed her as the primary signer, with full cancellation rights. The catering contract named her alone. The florist, the band, transportation, decor. Every vendor tied to one name, Raina Cole. Not Mira. Not Valerie. Not Evelyn. Just her. She exhaled slowly, feeling something inside her shift, not anger, not heartbreak, but recognition of a power she hadn't realized she possessed. At 12:47 a.m., she drafted her first email. "Hello, Kimberly. As the authorized signer on this event, I'm formally requesting cancellation effective immediately." She paused, then hit send. Then she sent another. And another. One by one, she notified every vendor. Responses came back quickly. Received. Understood. Will proceed according to policy. No pushback. No confusion. They were simply following the signer, the only person with legal authority. Around 2 a.m., she began calling vendors. The catering manager said softly, "I figured something like this might happen. We'll handle it." The florist simply sighed. The band coordinator whispered, "I'm sorry it came to this." By 3:30 a.m., her inbox was full of confirmations. The wedding was gone, quietly, efficiently, exactly the way she had built it. By dawn, the sky outside her window glowed pale silver. Raina closed her laptop and poured herself a fresh cup of coffee. Her hands were steady, her mind clear. They had told her not to come to the wedding. Fine. She wouldn't come, but she would also take the wedding with her. Every petal, every chair, every note of music they had. Expected to enjoy without her. The morning after, her phone exploded with missed calls. Valerie, Mira, Evelyn, and even numbers she didn't recognize. Voicemails stacked into dozens. She didn't listen to a single one. Instead, she made breakfast exactly as she always did. Eggs, toast, black coffee. Routine had always been her anchor, and she clung to it now as though it was the only thing keeping her balanced. By noon, the first email came from the venue coordinator. Mira and her family arrived requesting to restore the booking. We informed them that only the signer can authorize changes. Raina imagined the scene. Valerie's tight smile failing, Myra's wide eyes filling with panic, Evelyn stepping forward with polished politeness sharpened into command. A second email followed. "They're upset, but we are following policy." Raina turned her phone face down and continued eating her breakfast in silence. By 3 p.m., the messages shifted from confusion to accusation. "Why would you sabotage the wedding? This is humiliating. You're acting unstable." The word unstable appeared 3 times. Raina stared at it and almost laughed. They had always used that word whenever they wanted to avoid accountability. Instead of replying, she opened her laptop again and created a folder labeled records. Into it she organized everything: emails, receipts, signed contracts, proof of every transaction. Evidence, not conversation. At 9 p.m., her doorbell rang. Raina's first instinct was to freeze. No one ever visited her unannounced. She checked the peephole. Mira. Her sister looked nothing like her perfectly curated self. Her hair messy, mascara smudged, sweater stretched at the sleeves. She wasn't crying yet, but her face trembled at the edges. When Raina opened the door, Myra's voice cracked. "Raina, please let me in." Raina stepped aside. Mira perched on the edge of the couch, clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. "Why did you do this?" she whispered. Raina kept her voice calm. "You told me not to come." Mira shook her head. "It wasn't meant literally." "Texts are literal," Raina said. Mira swallowed. "I was stressed. Evelyn said it might be calmer if you weren't there." Raina let out a small laugh, dry and humorless. "Calmer," she repeated. "Evelyn hasn't seen me angry. This is calm." Mira twisted her fingers, eyes glossy. "I didn't think you'd react like this." Raina tilted her head. "How did you think I'd react after paying for everything?" Myra's silence was answer enough. Finally, she whispered. "Mom said you wouldn't mind. She said you're strong. You'd understand." There it was again, the one sentence they used to excuse every dismissal. Raina stood slowly. "I canceled because I was the signer. Because you removed me. Because you expected my money, but not my presence." Myra's voice cracked. "We need the wedding back. They said it can't go forward without you. The venue made us wait in the lobby like we didn't belong." Raina nodded once. "You didn't. Legally, neither of you had authority." Myra's breath stuttered. "Raina, please. Just sign it again. Just put it back." Raina shook her head. "You wanted me gone. Now you want me back because you need what I provided, not who I am." Myra's knees buckled, and she sat down heavily. Before Raina could speak again, 3 sharp rings echoed through the apartment. Mira flinched. Raina opened the door to find Valerie standing there, face tight with frustration and desperation. Behind her stood Evelyn Wells, spine rigid, expression poised like someone accustomed to getting her way. Valerie pushed inside without waiting. "Raina Cole, what on earth is going on here?" Raina folded her arms. "What do you mean?" Valerie's voice rose. "Canceling the wedding. You embarrassed us." Raina blinked slowly. "You erased me first." Valerie waved her hand dismissively. "We did what we had to do to keep peace." "You broke the peace," Raina replied. "You removed me from the wedding I paid for." Evelyn stepped forward, voice clipped. "We needed a harmonious environment. You complicate things." Raina stared at her. "You're looking at the calmest version of me." Evelyn hesitated but collected herself. "Your behavior proves our concern." "My behavior?" Raina said. "I sent polite cancellations. Meanwhile, you told people I was unstable." Evelyn looked away. Valerie crossed her arms. "Fix this, Raina." "No," the single word cut through the room. Myra's voice finally broke. "Please, Raina. The venue said you're the only one who can authorize it. They told us we'd have to ask you." She swallowed hard. "Raina, please sign it." Raina looked from sister to mother to Evelyn, all waiting, expecting the oldest pattern to return. Expecting her to fold. Expecting her to sacrifice herself again because it was easier for them. That familiar heaviness rose in her chest, but this time she didn't bow beneath it. "No," she said again, quieter but firmer. Myra's knees buckled, and she sank into the couch, her breath breaking on a sob she fought to contain. Valerie gasped. Evelyn stiffened like she'd never been refused in her life. Mira whispered, Why are you doing this to me?" Raina knelt slightly, meeting her sister's eyes. "I'm not doing anything to you. I'm doing something for me." Silence rippled through the room. Mira shook her head in disbelief. "Raina, please. Please, I'm begging you." Raina stood again, her voice steady. "You removed me from your wedding. So, I removed your wedding from my name." Valerie's breath hitched, as if she'd been slapped. Evelyn went pale. Mira covered her mouth with trembling fingers, tears spilling. Raina opened the door. I want you to leave now. No more calls. No more messages. And no more using my strength as your excuse. They stared at her, waiting for her to relent. She didn't. Eventually, the three women filed out, shocked, defeated, disoriented. Raina closed the door behind them and leaned her forehead against the wood. The exhale that slipped from her chest wasn't triumphant. It was release, a release she'd been holding inside her body for decades. The apartment around her felt still, as if her refusal had pressed the pause button on the world. For the first time in her adult life, Raina made a decision that wasn't rooted in obligation or expectation. It was rooted in self-preservation. Later that evening, she brewed a cup of herbal tea and sat by the window, listening to the distant hum of Seattle traffic. She thought about Myra's tears, Valerie's shock, Evelyn's outrage, three women who had always written her role for her without ever handing her the pen. No more, she whispered into the quiet room. No more being the invisible backbone. No more being the convenient strength. No more being the one they expected to carry everyone's weight except her own. That night, she slept deeply, deeper than she had in years, without waking once. In the morning, she opened her laptop to find new confirmation emails, refunds processed, accounts closed, balances finalized. Everything they thought was theirs was returned to her. Over the next few days, the chaos outside Raina's life grew louder, but her personal world became strangely quiet. Valerie tried calling 6 times a day. Mira left increasingly desperate voicemails. Evelyn wrote a stiff message insisting the cancellation was inappropriate and emotionally reactive. Raina ignored all of them. She wasn't interested in repairing a story in which she had never been more than a tool. Meanwhile, the vendors continued to deliver updates with polite professionalism. Refund issued. Contract voided. Balance returned to signer. Each confirmation reminded her she had acted within her rights. She had simply exercised authority they thought she would never dare to use. She began to realize that her quietness had always been mistaken for submission. But the truth was far simpler. She had spent her entire life prioritizing others because no one had ever encouraged her to prioritize herself. So she made a decision. One small step toward reclaiming her own voice. She reopened her old therapy file and scheduled an appointment with Dr. Sarah Quinn, the therapist she hadn't seen in 2 years. On the morning of the session, she walked through the city with her hands in her pockets and felt, for the first time, a small sliver of freedom. Dr. Sarah's office smelled like eucalyptus and held the kind of quiet that encouraged honesty. Raina sat on the familiar gray couch and folded her hands in her lap. It happened again, she said softly. Dr. Sarah nodded. Tell me what it is this time. Raina took a breath and explained, from Myra's first wedding request to the text telling her not to come, to her mother's call, to the slow unraveling of her access to wedding plans, to the contracts, to the midnight cancellations, to the confrontation in her living room. Dr. Sarah listened without interruption, her calm presence grounding. When Raina finished, tears she hadn't expected welled in her eyes. I don't know if I did the right thing, she whispered. What if I went too far? Dr. Sarah leaned forward slightly. Let me ask you something, Raina. If someone repeatedly showed you that they only valued what you could give, not who you were, would you still call that love? Raina's throat tightened. No, she murmured. Then what you did wasn't punishment, Dr. Sarah said. It was protection. For the first time, Raina didn't argue. She simply nodded, letting the truth sink into the spaces her family's expectations had once filled. After the session, Raina didn't go straight home. She walked instead, through bustling streets, across crosswalks filled with strangers, past cafes and small bookstores. Seattle felt different, as though it had expanded around her, giving her room to breathe. She stepped into a small coffee shop and ordered a drink, sitting by the window to watch people wander by. For a moment, she wondered what Mira was doing, whether she was still crying, whether Valerie was complaining to relatives, whether Evelyn was spinning a new story to protect her social image. And then, For the first time in years, Raina realized she didn't care. Not out of spite, but simply because she felt detached.
Free.
She opened her phone to find 30 unread messages. Her thumb hovered over them. Then she locked the screen and slid the device back into her bag. She used to think boundaries were walls that kept people out. But now she understood. They were fences that kept her safe. That evening, she joined an online meeting for a Women in Tech mentorship group. The conversations were open, supportive, full of women who made decisions without apologizing for existing. It felt like stepping into a room where no one expected her to be anything but herself. Wednesday nights soon became Raina's favorite part of the week. She found herself gravitating toward women who spoke with confidence, who asked for raises, who set limits with family, who practiced saying no without explanations. Their strength didn't feel heavy. It felt intentional. And it helped her build her own. One woman in the group, Jordan, said something that stayed with her. People treat you based on the boundaries you set, not the love you give. Raina repeated the sentence to herself often. It filled the quiet moments that used to be occupied by self-doubt. Slowly, she began making tiny changes in her life. She said no when coworkers asked her to pick up extra tasks. She declined last-minute favors. She even started preparing for a promotion she'd postponed for months. Each choice felt like a brick placed carefully in the foundation of a life she was finally constructing for herself. The noise from her family still existed, calls, texts, messages from relatives who heard something happened. But Raina let them flow around her like wind she didn't need to brace against. She realized that the version of her they relied on no longer existed. She wasn't obligated to carry them anymore. Weeks passed. The wedding date came and went quietly, without so much as a ripple in Raina's world. She didn't think about the venue or the flowers or the empty ballroom Mira had once twirled in. She didn't imagine what the ceremony might have looked like. She didn't picture Darren's face, or Evelyn's disappointment, or Valerie's explanations to extended family. Instead, she slept in that morning, made pancakes, and spent the afternoon reading by the window as rain tapped gently against the glass. Later, she met 2 women from her mentorship group for lunch. They laughed, shared stories, and made her feel lighter than she'd felt in years. "You look different," one of them said. Calmer. Raina smiled. "I feel different." When she got home, she found a large envelope in her mailbox. Her first instinct was alarm. Mail that size rarely brought good news. But when she opened it, she found something unexpected, a letter from Mira. The handwriting was shaky, uneven. The envelope included a small charm bracelet Raina had given her years ago. No demand, no request, just a folded note that said, "I'm sorry. I didn't understand what I was doing to you. I hope someday we can talk, not as sisters who owe things, but as sisters who choose each other." Raina sat with the letter for a long time. The apology wasn't perfect. It didn't undo the pain or erase the betrayal. But it was honest in a way Mira had never been before. Still, Raina didn't feel the immediate urge to call her. She didn't feel obligated to sweep everything under the rug. She placed the bracelet on her coffee table and folded the letter neatly. Healing, she realized, was not an event. It was a process. And this time, the pace would be hers alone. Over the next few days, she thought about what forgiveness should look like. Not the kind she'd been taught growing up. Be the bigger person forgiveness that demanded silence and sacrifice.
No.
She wanted the kind rooted in clarity and choice. She also recognized something important. Her absence at the wedding wasn't the beginning of her freedom. The moment she canceled those contracts, the moment she chose herself over obligation, that was when her life had quietly shifted direction. And she wasn't going back. On a quiet Saturday morning, she walked along Lake Union with a black coffee in hand. The sky was a soft gray, the water still. And for the first time, she felt like she was walking into a life she could call her own. As she walked the lakeside path, her mind drifted, gently, without bitterness. She thought about her childhood, the way she had always been expected to carry emotional burdens no one acknowledged. She remembered standing in the doorway as Valerie comforted Mira over the smallest things, while she herself learned not to cry because tears only made things harder. She remembered the silence of James, how he praised harmony more than honesty. And she realized something she had never named before. She had been trained to disappear, to be useful rather than visible, to be accommodating rather than considered. As she moved along the water, she whispered a quiet no more to the wind. No more shrinking herself to make others comfortable. No more giving without receiving. No more equating love with exhaustion. This new chapter wasn't about distancing from her family forever, but about redefining her relationship with herself. She paused at a bench overlooking the lake, closed her eyes, and breathed deeply. Not the shallow breaths she used to take when overwhelmed, but full, steady breaths that expanded her chest. For once, she wasn't preparing for crisis, tending to someone else's mess, or anticipating another request. She was simply living. A week later, Raina returned to therapy with new questions, not about her family, but about her future. She talked about career goals she had shelved for years. She confessed she wanted to travel alone someday. She admitted she wasn't sure how to build a life not centered around others' needs. Dr. Sarah smiled gently. "You're not rebuilding from nothing," she said. "You're rebuilding from truth." Those words lingered with Raina long after the session ended. She began sketching small plans, a trip to Vancouver, a certification course she'd postponed, the possibility of starting her own consulting branch someday. None of it felt rushed. All of it felt possible. One evening, after tidying her apartment, she sat on the sofa and stared at the quiet space around her. For years, quiet meant failure, isolation, a reminder that she wasn't valued. Now, quiet meant peace. It meant boundaries. It meant her life was finally arranged around her own voice rather than Myra's needs or Valerie's expectations. She realized she hadn't checked her phone in hours. When she picked it up, she saw another message from Mira, not begging, not pressuring. Just, "I hope you're doing okay. I'm taking responsibility in therapy too." Raina didn't respond. Not out of anger, but because healing isn't measured by speed. Over the following weeks, Raina noticed something unexpected. She no longer felt guilty for resting. She no longer rushed to reply to messages. She no longer felt her stomach tighten when her mother's name flashed across her phone. She even started setting do not disturb hours, something she once would have felt selfish for doing. One Friday evening, a coworker asked her to cover a late shift. Normally, she would have said yes without hesitation. Instead, she smiled and said, "I can't tonight. Have a good weekend." The words felt strange, but in a good way, like trying on a new coat that fit better than expected. She cooked dinner, lit a candle, and sat on the balcony watching the sky fade to dusk. She thought about the woman she used to be, the one who bent until she broke, and felt a mix of sadness and compassion for her. She didn't judge that version of herself. She simply understood her. Raina was learning that strength didn't mean carrying everything. Sometimes strength meant putting things down. And sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was stop performing the role others assigned them. She wasn't the dependable sister anymore. She wasn't the peacekeeper. She wasn't the invisible backbone. She was becoming something new. 1 month later, Raina received another letter from Mira, longer this time, filled with details about her own therapy sessions, regrets, realizations. She wrote about how Evelyn had influenced her decisions, how Valerie's expectations shaped her behavior, how she had taken Raina's presence for granted. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She offered accountability. Raina read the letter slowly, letting every word settle. She didn't feel anger. She didn't feel satisfaction. She felt distance. Healthy distance. She placed the letter in a drawer, not to hide it, but to save it for a time when she felt ready. That night, she made herself a warm bowl of soup, curled up on the couch with a soft blanket, and watched a documentary. The simplicity of the evening felt like luxury. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't bracing herself. She wasn't carrying weight that wasn't hers. Before bed, she stood by her window and looked out at the city lights. Everything shimmered with possibility, as if the world had widened now that she wasn't carrying invisible chains. She whispered to herself, "I am allowed to choose my peace." And in that moment, she believed it. And that, Raina realized, was the true lesson of everything she had endured. Not the wedding, not the cancellations, not the confrontation, but the shift within herself. She finally understood that boundaries weren't punishments. They were doors she closed so peace would have somewhere to stay. She thought of anyone out there carrying a family on their back until they disappeared beneath the weight. She imagined speaking directly to them, saying, "You're allowed to stop. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to choose yourself." She didn't know what her relationship with Mira would look like in the future. She didn't know whether Valerie would ever understand. She didn't care what story Evelyn told her social circle. What mattered now was that her life was her own. Not borrowed. Not demanded. Not shaped by someone else's emergencies. Her own. And for the first time, she stepped into her living room, turned on a soft lamp, and smiled, really smiled. Because in choosing herself, she hadn't destroyed anything. She had simply returned to herself what should have always belonged to her: her voice, her boundaries, her peace. If this story resonates with anyone reading, Raina would tell you this. Share your story. And if you've ever